Hey everyone, we are live.
That's
I
right.
think we are live. We're checking this. So, welcome to tonight's episode of the Guitar Doctor is in, and this is going to be an interesting evening. Hopefully, we can get through this because I'm running the whole show from my laptop over here myself tonight. So, unfortunately. The individual that works with me to help do this sometimes live, Texas, is out and sick. So I'm trying my hand at all the technology. But anyway, on to the show tonight. I have my special guest tonight is one of my students here at Belmont University, Creighton Holmes, and I'm so glad to have Creighton with me tonight as we're going to talk about rock guitar soloing technique and everything. And Creighton is a fantastic rock player, in my opinion. And but anyway, I'm not going to talk about him too much yet. What I'm going to do is let Creighton tell about where he's his hometown and say hi to a couple of people if you'd like to. But go ahead.
First off, hello, Mom and Dad. They're watching from St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I'm from. Yeah, I've been playing guitar since I was knee high to a grasshopper. My dad,
You're a really tall guy. I don't think you're very knee
so
high.
that's a long time ago, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I started out. My dad played guitar, so I always grew up with the guitar around. He introduced me to my favorite bands like Metallica, Stone Temple Pilots, Lynyrd Skynyrd. And he introduced me to Joe Satriani, who is my biggest influence, and I'd say him and my dad are the two guys that really inspired me to pick up the guitar and try to make the noises they were making. And so yeah, I've just played throughout my whole life, and then decided I wanted to go to school and study this thing and try to make sense of it all and get better and be around other players who have the same attitude as me. And about to graduate finally, which is pretty crazy. And yeah, so now I'm here.
Yeah, and he's here. I've been very fortunate to have Creighton as one of my students for the past almost 3 years now, 2.5 years, something like that. And wow, it's just been a blast. He keeps me on my toes. He's a really great player, so you'll get to hear from him in a minute. Just to go ahead and preface everything, the handouts or PDFs or whatever you'd like to call them for this episode are already up and available on my website at alanrobinsonmusic.com. So if you would like to have those to follow along or you want to pick them up later, that's where you can get them from. Just simply go to my website, and then there is a tab for The Guitar Doctor Is In, and that's where everything is. As a matter of fact, you can get previous episodes and all these PDFs and all this information that's on there is free. And so I just like to share a lot of the information right now that I can as I start growing this channel for this. And it gives me a lot of joy to do that, because I just love teaching. I love teaching here at the university. And so the more outreach I can get and share with folks, I think it's great. But we're going to start talking tonight, like I said, about rock guitar technique. And specifically tonight, I'm going to address tapping, because this is one of the things that has kind of become cliche, maybe a little passe now. I mean, it's not as big as it probably was, I guess, in the 80s and the early 90s, but it's still a really valid technique and a lot of fun. And Creighton and I have been working sometimes on his lessons. He's got a different approach than I do, and so tonight I'm going to teach him via camera and everything else some more techniques and how I think about the fretboard and applying some of this, and hopefully you'll gain something out of it as well. So let's dive right in. So one of the things that I find with tapping technique that a lot of students I won't say suffer from, I don't know what the right word is to look for this, but have to deal with, that is hard for them to understand, is when you're tapping on the strings, it's not just a tap and release kind of thing. You really got to treat it like hammer-ons and pull-offs. So when you tap on the string, I might need to turn up a little bit for this, but you have to actually push away if you're on the lower strings, or you have to sometimes pull in on the upper strings and the higher strings, but you might still be able to push off the fretboard. I think for the most part, most of mine, my licks and my ideas are all tap and push. And I don't know, Creighton, what with part of your style, attacking the notes like that, is that how you pretty much do it?
Absolutely. Well, when I used to tap, I always use the side of my pick. So I was always
Joe Satriani.
Yeah, it was a Joe style of playing.
Yeah.
Because, so yeah, that's how I always kind of tapped. And I still, like, if it's heat of the moment, I'm improvising, I always go to the pick because I'm just comfortable with it. But I would always struggle with that because when I would tap, I used to, it was more like a literally a tap. It
was a tap release, like a recoil kind of thing.
Exactly. And then you showed me this one to kind of push away from it, and then I was able to get more sustain, more character out of the note. And I still need to practice with it more because it's not something I'm comfortable with. But when I do practice it, it gets more kind of ingrained and it feels more natural.
Yeah.
Just kind of
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. So I mean, and it is, you know, if you don't play this technique a lot, or if you've not dabbled in it a lot, I mean, the first instinct is to tap on and just kind of release, and you lose some of the percussive nature of the line or the idea. So I'll show you just a couple of brief examples, and I'll let Creighton try some of these before I go into the full-fledged examples that I've created for the PDFs and whatnot. But like, if I'm thinking about most of this on one string, because there's a lot of ways of approaching this too, whether you're using full-blown scales, like major scales, or if you're using pentatonic scales, or if you're using arpeggios. There's many different approaches to using the technique. But I'm going to start with like pentatonic scales, just because I think it's very easy to kind of visualize on the fretboard, and therefore it just makes it easier to kind of get started with some of these ideas. But if I'm going to play a tapping line as an example, I'll put these examples in A minor pentatonic. Then in this case, I'm going to put box 1. I think I'm going to put box 1 under my hands. But anyway, the idea is that I'm going to take a fragment from that scale, in this case the root and the flat third, and I'm going to tap onto the 4th degree with my middle finger. Now some people will get rid of the pick and they'll tap with the first finger. It's really personal preference. I like to use my middle finger and other fingers, and you'll see that momentarily, because I like to be able to get back to my pick. So one of the things I do is I take my pick and I tuck it underneath my index finger. And that way it's tucked away. I can get it back out when I need to in order to go back into a picking pattern. But what I'll do is I'll tap on the note and I'll push it off. In this case, I'm going to push it off to A at the 5th fret and hammer on with my other finger to get the flat third. And you notice Creighton's using his index finger, which again is fine if that's more comfortable, because whatever finger that's the most comfortable to stabilize what you're doing, that's an important place to start. And the other thing I'll recommend with this is, at least for me, I find it better to take my thumb and actually brace it against the top of the neck when I'm playing this most of the time, to help with accuracy, because if my hand's free floating, timing can get away with me, and it's already a struggle to keep timing in place. So if you plant your thumb along the top of the fretboard where you can kind of slide it up and down the fretboard as you move your hand, if you're doing linear patterns and whatnot, that will really help stabilize the hand, and it doesn't really get in the way. It may be kind of hard to see at an angle like this, but so you can get it a little faster that way. But notice I'm tapping and pushing away. Yeah, that kind of idea. And with this too, now when I start crossing strings, that's where it gets tricky. As you start crossing the strings, your fingers can get, you're going to battle two different things here, maybe a couple of more, because you're having to multitask quite a bit. One, you're having to know exactly what scale pattern you're going to place under your fretboard hand or your left hand, and then your tapping hand is taking up part of another portion of a scale pattern, so you're overlapping scale patterns. In the first example I give, I'll throw this up on the screen here. The first example I give is coming out of pentatonic boxes. Actually, let me do this. Instead of going to that box, I will go to the box that I'm just demonstrating from, which is technically coming out of box 1. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually combine two boxes. So I refer to this pretty much as like a double pentatonic, because I'm going to have box 1 underneath my left hand, but my tapping hand is actually going to put the top of the box for box 2. So I've got to see the pattern that I'm going to go across the fretboard. In this case, it's like 10, 10, 10, 9, 10, 10. And so that's the top of box 2, and you can see that on the diagram. And so the first thing to do, and I think it's kind of a good recommendation to put each string as its own separate beat. So you're already grouping notes in thirds, so I think it's best if you put it into groups of 3s, fill them as triplets. And so if you've got a tempo around here, you can go. So example with the 2 low strings. You can keep building it. That's one way of going across. Until you get all 6 strings. Go ahead and... Yeah. And another thing, and so I'll mention this, and this again can be a lot of personal choice. There's some players that play with like the first 3 fingers a lot, and they avoid using the pinky a lot. And then there's some folks that will use all 4 digits and be able to access through the frets that way. So it depends on what you're doing, because I just noticed that Creighton was playing more with the first and third finger even there, whereas I tend to go for the pinky. Again, it can be personal preference. I highly recommend trying to get the pinky involved, but the pinky's a weak finger, and so therefore sometimes it's just really difficult to get.
Cheat.
You have to cheat.
I'm not good enough for my pinky yet.
You too, young grasshopper. We'll get my young Padawan. But no, it is personal preference, and it depends on how well you can stretch on the frets too. Because for some folks, depending on the size of your hand, stretching across 4 or more frets is a challenge. But I like to put these kind of things into exercises to where I get groupings of strings. I like to work with two string groups and 3 string groups. If you watch the other some of my other episodes, you know I'm a big fan of doing 2 string groups. Creighton knows I'm a big fan of doing 2 string groups.
Absolutely.
So I might get a pattern like this. So I'm going to go 3 strings, and I'll play the right note that time. And then what I do is I back up 1 string, and I go 2 additional strings past that. So the pattern starts this. Want to try that one? Cool. Yeah, so, and you can start working tempos from there. I like to mix pentatonics. I should quit that because I'm playing the wrong notes for you. And you can descend back the same direction, same way. Yep.
So I noticed when I'm doing my tapping here, I have a lot of string noise, and I'm having trouble to kind of like mute the string noise because this one, like right there, I have a little bit of lower notes ringing up. Do you have anything you recommend for string noise?
I dealt with that a long time ago, and I won't say that I don't get string noise sometimes. It's really hard, and that's a great question. I do know that, like, when I'm playing, one of the things that I'm doing as I go across, the lower part of my hand is really muting the higher strings as I come across. As I move into the higher strings, my palm starts coming involved here to come across. I think it's one of those things that you could try to practice it that way, and it's really not even my palm. I will say it's more in my wrist area because I feel it as I'm playing across. I feel the back part of my wrist, the front part of my wrist, the back part of my palm laying across the strings.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those kind of situations. Now I will say that for the longest time, and they still now they sell these professional string dampeners that you can get, the little Velcro string dampeners you get, and those are great too because they leave enough room under the strings to where you don't really kill all the tone that's in the strings as you slide it down or up the neck. In my early years, when I had hair, we would always take one of our ponytail holders and we would put it around the end of the neck, and it's because it was loose enough that you could slide it up and down to be able to dampen the strings, and that helps with the string noise. I don't look at it as a cheat anymore because I think the ultimate goal is just to play clean and play your lines and have the free accessibility. So if it works for you, it works for you. I kind of got away from that, I guess, because I don't use hair ties. I don't have hair anymore, so I don't worry about hair ties. See, myself and Joe Satriani. See, there's a common thread there. Because the cool thing with those kind of with the hair ties, I don't know that the professional or the professional line products do this as well, but it would easily slide over the nut of the guitar, so you could really get it totally out of the way if you were going for some open string kind of stuff too. But that's one way. But I mean, really, if you just watch the way your hands are laying on the strings, because I'd have to look at your fretboard hand again. Play it again for me, because if you play it's really kind of looking at, are you keeping your fingers flat in this area, or are they up on their tips and very pronounced, like you would for fast runs.
Sure. Yeah, let's see.
So right there, you see, when I see it, I see your fingers really off a lot more, right? So I see them up on the tips more. Whereas if you look, see how my fingers are, like especially my index finger, for the viewing audience, my index finger is really flat on the string set. And see, I see your index finger popping off more. So that's probably something I would recommend that you'd work on is kind of keeping it a little flatter to the neck. It's almost like if you were playing, it's something like that to where you could get the double stops happening.
Sure.
If you can get that kind of feel under your index finger, that would probably help damper some of the string noise, because it is really tricky. So anyway, with these pentatonics, doing that kind of exercise, what I usually have students do is they go through all 5 box shapes. So they got to know all the individual box shapes. But I recommend building it really slow until you know them. Other things you could do too to make yourself more aware and kind of gain some intervallic distance that's kind of interesting is here I had the 2 boxes side by side, where I was going directly with 2 boxes. But I could spread it out and maybe choose like the bottom part of the next box up, or the top part of the third box, however you want to look at it. And I can increase the range distance now, so the intervals. So it gives a little bit of a different color just because you've increased that range. And you can keep on going up and seeing even more, right? There we go. That note, right? I love live. Live is great.
That's right.
Can't cut that one. But anyway, just kind of playing around with it, and it allows you to see the different shapes as you're moving up the fretboard. But I'll also move them as you go up. So if I've got box 1 and box 2, then I can have box 2 and box 3 layered, right? So you just have to realize where your shapes are there. This is not my night. I should have had more Coke Zero or something to keep me going, but that's okay. But anyway, all 5 of the boxes are on the PDF, or all 5 box combinations are on the PDF for this exercise. Now, withstanding just doing basic pentatonic kind of stuff, and if you want to consider that basic. Another thing that I will do with the pentatonics is I like to mix them. And I think that's probably why it's hard for me sometimes to just do the straight exercise, because I will mix different pentatonics that I know that can overlap or be superimposed. So like if I've got an A minor 7 chord, A minor 9, one of the things I like to do is I like to superimpose a perfect 5th up from there. So I'll use E minor pentatonic over top of that to give some additional colors, because then I can bring the 9th degree into the picture, which is not part of that. I can bring the note B into that. So I might play E minor, and you could play any of the E minor boxes, but let's say I want to come here and I'm going to play E minor from what box would that be? Box 4. So those became my tapping notes, because now I'm going to use 2 tapping notes. And I'll just do something like this. And in my right hand, or my left hand rather, I will keep A minor pentatonic. And I'll put E minor on the top of it. And so it just adds that color of having the 9th in there.
You want me to play the chord with it too?
Yeah, play the chord with it, and we'll hear what that sounds like with the chord. So we get, I guess I should turn it up. So it's just really kind of cool because it really spaces out the intervals. It's kind of like the trick of doing the other where you just moving single notes of the scale up. But you definitely get a little more color in that. And if you also think of it from this kind of perspective, these pentatonics right now we're playing A minor for A minor, and now put E minor over top of that. But if you also think about the fact that A minor and C major are relatives, then you can expand your color palette out more to other chords. You know, actually, like if in this case where I'm stacking the two pentatonics, I could also be thinking, you know, C major 7. Like play a C major 7, we'll see the difference in the sound for that, right? So we get. So it's a really kind of cool sound. If you want to go a little further, then I go backwards from the A minor to F major. So I'm thinking about A minor as if it's the 3 chord here, or in a sense, at least the 3rd of the chord. But I'm going to keep the E minor because that B natural that was the 9 on the A minor or the 7th on the C major now becomes the sharp 11 on F major. So I get a sound like this is very open and flighty. So that's a really kind of cool sound. So whenever you could stack some of these, and I actually did a video, it may have been the 2nd episode, it may have been in the 1st episode, I can't remember now. But I did a video talking about substitute pentatonics. And if you can find ways of joining 2 different pentatonic scales, you get some really cool sounds, or just substituting all in all, and that's really cool. So, you know, that would work. Another cool sound, stacking pentatonics. I'm going to let you do this one.
Okay.
And this is not a perfect science for this particular one, but it is kind of a cool little trick to get some outside dissonant sounds. If I want to think about A7 as being a dominant chord, like almost like an altered chord. Yeah, if I want to think of it as being altered. Even though A minor pentatonic is not the scale of choice for that, it's got a lot of notes that's going to work, but what we're going to do is we're going to play A minor pentatonic in our left hand, and then using the exact same shape. So I'm going to use box 1 here. I'm going to use a box 1 shape for the tritone substitute. So tritone substitute is a diminished 5th away or an augmented 4th. So in this case, E flat. So up here, I'm going to have E flat minor pentatonic.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And down here, I have A minor pentatonic. You can take it slow, man.
Yeah. Okay, so like that. Like
Yeah. Yeah. So at a slow speed, it definitely sounds interesting. But you know, if you had that chord and you were playing it at kind of an up tempo,
sounds like you're dialing some like ringtone.
yeah.
Robot.
It might have been the wrong number. But at the same time, it's just a really kind of cool sound. It gives you, you know, so you might use that as an altered dominant trick. If you're a rock player and you're trying to get into playing changes, this is a cool thing to do with the 5 chord and then resolve it back in. So like if I'm thinking about A7 altered and it's going to resolve to the D minor 7, well, I'm already in A minor, which would be now, if you think about what I said a minute ago, A minor would be a perfect 5th up from D. So I can keep that A minor going here. And I might do something like where I can go with E flat over top of the A7 altered, right? So make sure you got a flat 13 in there. Yeah, that's okay. And then so you have this kind of thing. And then all of a sudden D minor comes in. And now what I'm going to do is I put D minor up here, kept A minor as my static. So I had E flat and just resolved it into D minor. So you could think about it, you know, moving up. And so, you know, just feel the harmonic pulse. Yeah. So if I'm thinking 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's put those chords behind it just to hear that, right? So we go, let's see if we can do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then go right to the D chord. Okay. 4 counts on each chord. Yeah. 2, 3, 4. Right, so you can hear that resolution, and depending on the tempo, it's just really a cool kind of way of
Well, the thing I like about it is it's using something that all guitar players are really comfortable with, just a basic like pentatonic shape, and just with basic understanding of how to substitute, and you can get these wide sounding, interesting harmony just from using a basic thing that we've all learned,
right?
That we know, and it's easy. As long like all you have to do is just get your little tapping down and understand some harmony, and you can play anything you want, really.
I mean, it's a lot of fun to take and that's what I always recommend to so many of my students is don't reinvent the wheel. And I mean, this isn't really reinventing the wheel, because if it's a commonplace tool like pentatonics, like you said, and you know them, and you're trying to learn to play changes, then take something you know, use it in a different way, because then you can have some success, get certain sounds in your ear that you're not going to be accustomed to at first, like that weird tritone sound, and you don't have to struggle with trying to learn a new technique or a new shape or anything at first. Kind of get in the sound, because it's all about making music at the end of the day. It's, so if you can jam and get with some friends and try a couple of things that are new, but they're not totally new, right. It's a great way of going about it.
Exactly.
Some more examples of this. Well, actually, I'll share another example here coming up pretty soon when we do this etude, because it's based around it. But let's talk about major scales for a moment, and how you can approach this with major scales. So we just did this with the pentatonics. And this might be a good time, too, to mention, because, like you're doing the one finger jumping back and forth. I was kind of doing that as well. There's great exploration that you could do by using multiple fingers. Like I like to get rid of my pick a lot of times, and I will use two fingers, like my index and my middle finger, where I jump back and forth. That kind of thing, because it can give you faster, cool runs, and sometimes we just like the fast, cool runs. But anyway, I'll talk more about that in a minute with some of these licks and how to practice some of that, and why, more importantly, that I came to using that kind of technique than just the one finger. So let's take major scales now. And for this, and I just kind of grew up playing 3-note per string scales. I think you play a lot of 3-note per string scales. We've talked about that over the past couple of years and use that. Depending, it doesn't really matter which system you play through. You could play through 3-note per string. You could play through a cage system. There's a couple other ways of looking at the fretboard. Everything is great for one purpose or another, and it has its limitations. So there's not the perfect method, in my opinion, to go about doing this. But for this, I use 3-note per strings because I turn it into a 4-note per string scale. And you do get a little bit of repetition in this. So like if I'm going to use G major, I would be using this 3-note per string pattern. And I think you know that, right? Right. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually taking this G Ionian or G major, however you want to look at it, and I'm going to combine the next diatonic note of the scale across the fretboard on each string. So in this case, I'm going to be looking at C, but as I go across, everything is moving in fourths, because these 3-note per string scales move across in fourths. C, D, F sharp, B, E, A. And so it's really moving in diatonic fourths across the fretboard to keep some symmetry. And so that means I'm going to be moving in fourths with my tapping finger as well. So I'll have C, F sharp, B, E, A, and D as my tap notes. It's just the next diatonic note. So if I'm playing on this string, I'll have something like this. Right. Move to the next string. So I'll start with F sharp, then I'll move across to B. So I can get the whole thing. And again, I just as a routine and developing the fretboard, start moving it up each of the modal patterns, each of the scale patterns, and keep adding that top note as you go through it. One other thing I'll do now, getting back to what I was talking about with the two fingers, is I do like to divide this up instead of using three notes under one hand and one note here. Is I'll abandon the pick at this point, and I'll use two notes. And I'll say the way this started for me was when I was in college, when I was attending Berkeley in my younger days. A really great friend of mine at the time, Don Lappin, who's a fabulous player and like one of the most monster tapping players I've ever known in my life. He played with two fingers for everything. He has a system for that, which is really great. And I remember at the time trying to learn that technique, and it just didn't really take for me in its full capacity. So like anything else, and Creighton and I were actually talking about this before we went live, a lot of technique and a lot of ideas that we come up with that are kind of signature to our own personal playing. Everybody's got something. Is something that is created out of necessity, or we have a desire to do something and we can't actually perform it the way that person does it, and so we come up with our own. And so I kind of did that for myself, because the way my friend would play a scale like this is if he's seeing like G, A, B, C, D, E. Oh. And that's why it didn't work for me, because I'd always miss and go to the next string. Did it twice in a row even. But anyway, so he'd see four notes on the scale, and he could just move this ultra fast, and it was ultra slinky and smooth. For me, it didn't work as well, but so what I would try to do is I compensated again by using my scale patterns going across the neck, but I would turn them into sextuplet patterns or straight eighth notes. We'll talk about that rhythmically in a moment. But what I would do is I would do these triplet patterns and alternate the fingers. And so it gave this blur of a line. It didn't just run the scale up the neck. And I kind of like that. And it's kind of fun to alternate back and forth. Gets a little muddy on the lower strings, but when you get it on, you kind of get it there. You want to try that one?
Yeah,
go for that one. You could try it on more of the middle set if you want, if it's cleaner, like maybe on the D or the G string. So think about at first, like if you're here, if you've got C, B and C, and E and D, right? And really listen for the articulation of the sextuplet. Yeah, and I guess another thing that I kind of stole that from was from the bass world, from Billy Sheehan. Because Billy will do these things where he gets the double tap note in there. And so I think that's kind of cool. One, I think it's a cool sound, and it also just looks cool when you're playing it.
Oh, yeah,
So a lot of this tapping stuff, admittedly, I know at first it was like, it just looks cool to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just fun. So that's one of the ways that I started using the two finger idea. And so I actually think I do have an example I could throw on the screen for seeing that right here. So the viewing audience can check that out. And again, it's on the PDFs on my website. But it shows going across the strings just like I did, and playing 4-note per string kind of groupings, and you can play them in 16th notes or whatever. And when one of the ways that I decided to start using the two fingers in order to come up with this for myself too was, again, going back to my friend's kind of concept. And like I said, I wanted to be able to play on one string where I can get these little fast runs where I can move them up. That kind of idea. But what really became fascinating for me was crossing to other strings. So here I'm all on the same string, and there's an exercise that I've got listed for that too, where I'm all on one string. But going across to the next adjacent string, so in this case, I've got D, E, F sharp, G, but I might like to go D, E, F sharp, B. And here's also one of those cases when I'm starting this right now, because I'm starting the sextuplet from the lowest note instead of tapping on, I'm plucking that string. Yeah, that kind of idea. So what's really cool is in this case, I'm looking at fourths. So I could see F sharp and B, G, C, A, and D. So I can have those kind of lines, which are really kind of fun to throw in.
Really cool.
And you can start moving around and experimenting with others, like F sharp. And we'll count how many bloopers tonight. But there's no B-roll out of this because it's all straight. It's all there. Can't hide. But the tricky part when you go to other strings further away is that you kind of get this little ghost note in there, because at least I do. Otherwise, you have to get back and do a hammer-on to nowhere from that string. And one of the ways I came up with this is, and I was showing this to Creighton too before the show, is I was writing a piece that I wanted to go across the strings in a clean tone to get, like, in this case, like a large C major 9 kind of thing. And I would work it and move it. It's almost like a Satriani kind of thing.
It is, yeah, it's kind of like Midnight.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that until just now.
I was thinking about that when I was watching.
No, well, I just ripped off Satriani. Sorry about that. Got the look and got the
got the Ibanez.
I got the Ibanez. It's just not. No, you got the Ibanez.
No,
you got Joe's Ibanez.
JS.
But yeah, so I was coming up through that and coming up with these hammer-ons from nowhere. To have to, as you descend, you got to come back and you got to hammer on to those notes to get back into it, and that's tricky. I mean, you can try this lick. It's fun. So like I've got basically, if you're looking at this lick, and I don't have a diagram for this or a PDF for it, but maybe I can add it on there. If you're interested, put it in the comments. Which we got to check the chat. I don't know if anybody's gonna. If anybody has any kind of comments here in a minute, we'll try to
involve them
and get you involved. So it's just not me rattling on forever, making mistakes and playing bad notes all night. But yeah, so I'm using the C9 chord, like a power chord that you'd play for prog rock, right? The add 9 kind of thing. And so just hammering on those, and then I'm coming up and I'm grabbing E with my index finger on the same string of the D, and then I'm grabbing B with my ring finger. So when I come back down off of this lick and I hammer back onto the E, then I pluck the D. And then I got to hammer back onto the G from nowhere, hammer on from nowhere, and then back to the C, hammer on from nowhere.
That's a mind pretzel there.
And that's the tricky part. It is so easy to hit another string, But you know, I'd work that up, and then I'd jump over to the next string. That kind of thing.
Cool, yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. I mean, I don't really get to play like this often anymore, but
Yeah.
that's why I like students like Creighton, because he'll come in here and he'll push me to play this kind of stuff. But anyway, all these little tapping ideas, they're a lot of fun, and to try, whether you know they seem a little passe or not, but that's okay, you know. So I put up here, and I'm going to throw it up on the screen real quick. Somewhere here. Got to click the right icon. This E minor etude that I wrote, based off of this, and what it does, I'll kind of walk you through it. I might play it, but we're going to jam over the changes no matter what, and try to use some of it and do different things. But the etude is based off of mixing some pentatonics and mixing major scale ideas. So like in this opening statement over this E minor, if you want to just play the chords behind it, just static, that'll be cool. So what I do, and I'm actually using 3 tapping fingers for this lick. And what I'm combining is E minor pentatonic under my right hand, and I'm putting B minor pentatonic under my tapping hand. And the reason I have to use 3 fingers is because when I play this line, I grab that high B with my ring finger, because I got to start the lick back over with my index finger. So it kind of gives this a little off feel. And so that's being played over an E minor 9. So it sounds like this. Because I'm getting the 9th in there from playing the B minor. And then the next lick is, it's an A minor and an E minor kind of combination over an A minor. So I get this shape. So in the lower hand, I've got A minor happening. In the top hand, I'm really playing an E minor. I can't think. So it sounds like this over top of A minor. And it goes back to E minor. So then the next page, and I think it's on the next page, so I think I have to flip my screen here. I'm learning the technology. But on the next page, then all of a sudden I have C major 7. This is where I start involving some of the scales. And so I'll do that. I'm keeping the same kind of pattern, but in this case, I'm going to use a C Lydian scale over top of C major 7. So there's that same pattern to keep the fingering pattern. So you've got C major 7 now. And you get the Lydian sound because of the F sharp. And then it goes to a D add 9. So I do a D mixolydian pattern. And then I'm back to E minor. So in a slow pace, I guess we have to be right here. So we'll try to play through those changes. Nice slow pace. What am I thinking? So it goes like this. I'll take this off the screen because you can look at it from the PDF from the website. But 1, 2, 3, and. So that's the last part of that lick. I haven't played that one in a while. And all I'm doing there is I'm actually moving pentatonics up the neck. And then you got to get up there too. 22nd fret to bend it up to 24th if you don't have 24 frets.
I do not.
You do not. You do not. So you have to do that. So anyway, that's the etude. It's a lot of fun. It is tricky though, as you can see. These fingers just keeping that in time. The other thing I did with this, and I meant to mention it earlier, and we were talking about the triplets for everything, is I took these 3-note per string patterns, which is a really cool thing to do. Take these 3-note per string patterns, but put them in groupings of 2s and 4s. So I'm really feeling 16th note. I mean, it's really 16th note figures that I'm playing over, and that gives this rhythmic displacement kind of thing. And I think, to me, I think that's the thing that makes this kind of sound like a cascading waterfall kind of, I don't know what kind of descriptive visual thing that you could put with that. But it doesn't really take that long to get it fast. It starts falling. I say that, but okay, so it might take a little bit of time to get it going, especially while you're talking and doing it.
So good you can talk and do it at the same time.
It's such a good lick. You can talk and do it at the same time. You know, maybe even move it back and forth with the others. I don't know if I can go down to the C, but I'll try. Anyway, it's fun. Give it a try. You got the PDF now, so you can try it. You can go try it. That's for your lesson next after spring break. You got to come back and be able to play that.
Sounds good.
That tempo.
Cool.
But we're gonna have some fun here at the end before we break it. Actually, let me check the comments. I don't know if we got anybody commenting anything and wanting to say anything here. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to ask. We'll give it just a second. I don't guess we're gonna have anybody asking any questions. Maybe not. That's okay.
They're all scared.
They're afraid I'll play another wrong note.
Yeah, you scared them away with all the
wrong notes, man. There are no wrong notes. It's just less than perfect resolutions.
That's right.
I had several less than
happy
perfect
accidents.
Happy accidents. Well, cool. Maybe somebody will think of something here in a minute. But what I'll do is let's go ahead and we'll just jam for a minute. We can use that chord progression, and feel free to try to use some of those if you want.
Yeah.
And we'll just trade back and forth a couple times. All right. Cool. All right. 2, 3. And the white snake chord. All right, man.
Awesome job.
So
fun.
great having you with us here tonight.
Thank you. Yeah,
man.
thanks
This
for
is
having me.
fun.
This was
Thanks for those watching
amazing.
and those who may watch later. Let's see. Actually, we got something on here. Let's see what this is. Ethan Merrick. Ethan,
Yeah.
the first episode 1. Ethan,
Shout out,
wonderful
Ethan.
play and shout out. What about hammering on from nowhere with the left hand? Yeah, so kind of we're talking about that a little bit earlier because that's a tough thing to do. But because I was doing it with the C, right? So there's some really cool stuff. I'm not really great at doing that. That's one of the things that I need to work out of for necessity to see what I can come up with to do that because I know like Greg Howe will do that kind of thing a lot, right? So,
Absolutely.
you know, one of the things, at least I know the process that I kind of think about it. If you put like a G major triad in this hand, and so you got, you know, just like that C shape kind of thing, you know, and then in the top hand, you could put maybe the E form if you're thinking out of cage kind of stuff. One way of doing it, and so you can gotta get. And so right there, I'm having to hammer on with that B. Maybe if I put a little more gain on. That's a really hard technique. Thanks, Ethan, for. Now I've got to go home and practice. I got to go practice for it. But yeah, so hammer-ons from nowhere. It just takes a lot of strength, but it's the same concept of tapping with this hand, but you got to apply it here. And for it's a tough timing.
It takes a lot of left-handed strength.
It does, especially. But thank you, Ethan. Let's see. Anybody else got anything before we close out? Going once, going twice. All right. Hey, everyone, thanks for being here. Creighton, thank you for being here. Creighton's graduating this semester, so I'm going to miss this guy dearly because I have a lot of fun with him when he comes in. When is your senior recital?
My senior recital is Sunday, March 23rd.
That's right. It's coming up.
At noon, 12 p.m. at the Paisley.
12 p.m.
Paisley
So,
room.
if you're a Belmont student in the Nashville area or whatever, you need to check out his recital. He is playing some really killer stuff on there. I know he's doing, Spain? You're doing Spain from Chick Corea in a fusion style.
Yep, Tom Coyle version. I'm doing Deliver Us by Andy Timmons. Great rock song.
Great tune.
Doing High Five by Frank Gambale, who's turned into one of my favorite guitarists. You introduced me to him. I'm doing Manhattan by Eric Johnson. It's a sweet tune.
And he sounds killer on this tune, by the way.
Thank you.
Sounds killer.
Thank you. And then we're going to do a classic, Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So
if you're around, definitely don't miss Clayton. What am I saying? Creighton is close. See, I'm missing notes. I'm missing names. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. But don't miss Creighton's recital because it is going to be something to be seen. He is really doing great. And I'm going to encourage him to do this. I don't think you've done this. I've not seen this on your social media.
Okay.
But for this semester, he transcribed this Guthrie Govinlick video of Guthrie playing in what he calls the Larry Carlton style. And let me just tell you, this guy smashed it. It was downright scary, and he was playing right with Guthrie. So anyway, wonderful player. Thanks for everybody that tuned in. Thanks for everybody that will tune in. Come back and check it out. The next episode, which should be a week from now. And thanks for all the support. And go check out my website. Check out my Instagram and get logged on there. And I hope to see you in the future. All right?
Cool.
And we are officially out of here. Take care. Now go practice.